Okay, so again, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this seminar on advanced care planning and a brief discussion on Shin Buddhist wisdom for end of life. And so let me begin by sharing my screen with you. And so, aloha everybody. I'm Reverend Blaine Higa from the Kono Hongwanji Buddhist Temple. And so this morning we'll be briefly talking about Shin Buddhist wisdom for end of life and what lessons can we learn from our tradition to help us navigate these difficult times, this difficult moment in our lives, facing end of life. And so we begin, right, that in Buddhism, right, we talk about the foundational aspects of, you know, of life, right? That their birth, old age, sickness, and death are just a natural part of our human existence, our human life. And that's what the Buddha taught, right? And the Buddha believed that we could find freedom, right, from these sufferings of life. And in his story, right, of the Buddha and how he discovered his path to awakening, right? He as a young prince, right? He was sheltered, right? He wasn't allowed to see the realities of life, and so, but fortunately, one day, several days, right? He was able to leave the palace, and then he was able to experience, um, an old man, right? And he asked his chariot, his attendant, who is that, sir? That's an old man. And he said, what does that mean? And the attendant said, every one of us will experience this, right? We will all become old, right? And subsequently, right, the next time he went out, he saw a man who was ill and sick, right? And then he saw a funeral procession, right? And so in all of these cases, right, he came to realize the truth of life, right? That life is impermanent, life is continually changing and evolving, right? And that nothing stays uh, permanent or fixed, right, in our lives. And then he saw a monk, right, in one of his excursions out of the palace, and he saw this monk as someone who was seeking the way, right, out of suffering. And so he aspired, right, to find the way out of suffering and to relieve our suffering. And so this is, right, the fundamental understanding we have of life in Buddhism, right? That we are born, we will grow old, we will get sick, and then we will eventually die. But this is not something to be feared, right? Because we have the Dharma, we have the teachings of the Buddha, as our guide. So, right, so the three fundamental marks of existence that Shakyamuni realized, right, and taught us was that life is impermanent, that all conditioned things are impermanent. All things are in constant flux and change in relation to causes and conditions, right? That life, there is suffering, that there is dissatisfaction and suffering in life, the changing conditions of our physical lives, the impermanent nature of happiness, right? And the unwholesome states of mind, right? That um, both happiness and unhappiness, will arise and fall away, right? But um, and when we talk about suffering, right, we don't always mean necessarily, sometimes suffering or dukkha, right, is translated as this term of suffering. But suffering really means, right, in this Buddhist context, dissatisfaction or dissatisfactoriness with our lives, or things that are not um, going according to the way we wish it to, right? And so, and ultimately, there is a sense of non-self, right? That nothing exists in our world independently or statically, right? Everything exists only because of conditions that make our existence possible, right? That we are made up of numerous causes and conditions, right? That who we are, right, is related to everything else in this universe, that we are not alone, we're not isolated, right? So these three marks of existence are the fundamental understandings of human life, that the Buddha taught, right? And so, dealing with end of life is one of the most painful and the most one of the most significant things, right, we will ever face, is our own mortality. However, with the Dharma as our guide, we can come, as you can see here in this slide. This is from our guidebook for end of life that we have for our members and who have services or funeral services with us at Kono Hongwanji, right? So when dealing with the death of a loved one, we come face to face with the reality of impermanence and awaken to the truth of interdependence, right? With the Dharma as our guide, the passing of a loved one can be an opportunity for spiritual growth and deepen our understanding of and appreciation for life. The spiritual guidance and the rituals of Buddhism can provide solace and help facilitate healing and a return to wholeness. Our bereavement team is here to provide help during this difficult and often confusing time. Our minister is also available for spiritual support and counseling. We hope that this guidebook will be a resource for you and your family as you prepare to honor your loved one and begin your journey of bereavement. May the Nembutsu be a source of comfort and peace for you during this difficult time. Right? Namo Amida Butsu. Right? So, understanding, right, that life is impermanent, understanding that life is interdependent, right, both come together when facing our end of life, right? Because we don't go through this journey of life alone, right? And we don't leave this life alone either, right? That in whatever life journey that we're on, in whatever condition that we find ourselves in, we are intimately connected to others, family, loved ones, friends, right? And caregivers. And ultimately, we're always connected, right? And embraced by Amida Buddha, by the dynamic working of wisdom and compassion that sustains us and embraces us throughout our lives, just as we are, and holds us and embraces us when we're making that transition from this world to the Pure Land. So, in our tradition, we read this letter on white ashes by a Renyo Shonin, right? So this is a collection of letters of the Gobunsho, right? Or the collection of Renyo's letters written over 600 years ago. And this letter, right, is captures the essence of the Nembutsu teaching, right? Captures the essence of Buddhist teaching, of how we should understand life and the impermanence of life. But yet there's joy in that, right? And how we should turn to the Dharma, turn to the Buddha's teachings for guidance to help us to live. Too often we think of Buddhism as only about death, and that's really a misnomer. Buddhism really is about life. The teachings are about how do we live? How do we want to live each moment of this unrepeatable life? And the teachings ask us to think deeply and critically about our lives, and they offer comfort and solace, right, in times of grief. And so, right, we can see here, right, in Renyo's letter, right, that our human existence, right, is fleeting. right? That, you know, who among us can maintain our human form for even 100 years? However, you know, in today's world, you know, people are living a lot longer, right? So, however, right, there is this understanding, right, that life is temporary, impermanent, right? And, you know, how quickly can things turn, right? That in the morning, we may have radiant health, and in the evening, we may return to ashes. And so, how do we care for our own lives and the lives of our loved ones, right? That our human existence, right, is truly um, a remarkable thing, right? In the homages, right, it says, hard is it to be born into human life. Now we're living it. Difficult it is to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear them, right? And so this is our opportunity to gain emancipation, right? To hear the Dharma, to encounter the Dharma, and to let the Dharma work in our lives, so that we can live fully, gratefully, and well. And so ultimately, right, what Renyo is saying, right, is by so understanding the meaning of death, we shall come to fully appreciate the meaning of this life, which is unrepeatable, and thus to be treasured above all else, right? And so, you know, one of my, I worked with a family recently, maybe in the past few years, who their mother had passed away, and she was very devout, Shin Buddhist, and in our in my pre-funeral consultation with them, as I got to know the family and got to know their mom, and you know, they were sharing some stories of their mom and how. Do you remember during the missile crisis a few years ago, and um, uh, the daughter, she was explaining how her mom, you know, was doing her, I guess, was gardening or doing her thing outside, and then, you know, the alert came, and I guess the daughter came and rushed and you know, and told the mom something, you know, something bad is happening, we have this, and the mom just, you know, kind of calmly went about her business, didn't, nothing really phased her, and then she just, you know, went back into the house after doing some gardening, and then just started to just sit down and read a book. And, you know, unfortunately, right, you know, nothing came of the missile crisis. However, you know, this story, right, was such a beautiful example, right, of having a deep and profound understanding of our own impermanence, but also entrusting in the Buddha's vow. And, you know, that story really touched me and really, really made me um, grateful to be able uh, to encounter uh, this family, and to encounter this woman's story, um, and her deep and profound, you know, faith, right, and her understanding. And so, right, this is what the letter is asking us to do, right, is to turn to the teachings, to be able to find comfort, to find wisdom, to find strength and resilience, to be able to face whatever it is in our lives. And so we can think of Renyo's letter, right, and his series of letters, right, as a testament, right, as a teaching, right, as something to be passing on to his followers, right, to all of us, right. We still read this letter 600 years later, and it still offers us wisdom and guidance for living and for understanding death. And so, you know, a few years ago, I came across this through a Kokomao seminar, actually, regarding spiritual wills. And this concept, right, comes from the Jewish tradition and is a way of passing on wisdom and love to future generations, right? It usually takes the form of a letter that can include family history, cultural and spiritual values, expressions of love, hopes and dreams, and life lessons. You know, unlike a regular will, um, and hopefully everyone has, you know, a will or a trust and your own personal legal documents in place, right? A spiritual will, right, focuses on the intangible heart of an individual. What are the values that you cherish and the most, and what would you like to pass on to your children, your grandchildren, and to future generations? You know, as Coco Ma will present and Hope will present today, right? It's having the conversation about your wishes, about how would you like to be cared for when your time comes. A spiritual will, right, or is also an important um, aspect, right, of our process of living and dying, right? What is it that we want to pass on to our children, to our descendants, to those around us, right, who will come after us?
Yeah.
What values, what meaningful things uh, that we'd like to share and that are important to us, right? And which spiritual wills, right? Or just the having the conversation, right? Talking story, right? With loved ones of what would you like to have when your time comes, and what's important to you. So the woman I had mentioned in my story just a little bit earlier, you know, she had requested of her children that she'd like to have a bedside service. Please remember um, to contact uh, the reverend and to have a bedside service done, um, because it's meaningful to me. And so the family, you know, honored her request and reached out, and I was able to do her bedside service and to be able to uh, hold that family, um, you know, in that time of grief. And so, you know, just like an advanced healthcare directive, right? Talk to your family, right? It's so important to be able to share um, what will spiritually give you comfort, what will give you um, strength, right? And courage to face um, this most personal and intimate of moments, right? That all of us will face one day. Um, and how do we help um, your loved ones begin that process of healing? Um, so, you know, we know Eshini and Kakushini, right? Shinran's wife and his daughter. And for many years, right, Eshini and Kakushini lived apart and separated, you know, and so their only mode of communication was to write letters to each other. And fortunately, we have a record of Eshini's letters um, that were discovered many years ago, and they're wonderful letters that give us insight into her lived experience as a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a Nembutsu follower, right? And in her letters, right, she shares right, the daily struggles of life, but also her hopes, her aspirations, right? Her deepest wish for her daughter, for others. And so here we can see that Eshini's letters can also we can also think of Eshini's letters as like a spiritual will, right? As a way of sharing values, a way of sharing her understanding of the Nembutsu. And so, you know, one of her letters, right? She talks about, I often think of your children, writing to Kakushini, and would like to hear the most recent news about them. Oh, will there ever be a chance for me to visit you? Or for you to come to see me once more while I am alive? Most likely not. I am ready to go to the Pure Land at any moment. In the Pure Land, we will be able to know everything clearly. So I hope that you shall live with the Nembutsu, a life of Nembutsu, and come join me there. I know that if we can meet there in the Pure Land, everything will become clear. Right here we can see, right, Ishini's deep aspiration, her deep faith, right, and what she wanted to pass on and to share with Kakushini. Right, and so, our spiritual lives, right, are not just about the end of life, right? By understanding death, right, we come to appreciate and to fully understand the meaning of this life, right? Our impermanent, complex, but yet joyful lives, right? And the Dharma helps us to see that, to see both the fullness of life, right, in all of its ups and downs. Helps us to be able to discover inner strength, inner resilience, to be able to face the impermanent nature of our lives, right? In the past year and a half, right, we've faced the pandemic, and the pandemic has been a true lesson, right, in impermanence and interdependence. While the pandemic has been raging, right, the truths that the Buddha taught us, right, of old age, sickness, and death have continued, right? Ordinary life, right? The things that have always been happening since time immemorial has continued to happen, right? We have had births and deaths and transitions, all of these things. But yet, we have the Dharma as a guide to help us to meet life's challenges, right, with greater kindness, greater comfort, and greater peace. And so, like was briefly mentioned before, in our Shin Buddhist tradition, we have a service, right, called the Bedside Service, or Makuragyo, or Pillow Sutra, right? And this service, right, is performed shortly after the death of a loved one. Its purpose is to ease the pain and shock of immediate family members and close friends. This first service after the death of a loved one helps the family to focus on their inner spiritual lives during grief and loss. Traditionally, right, people only call the bonsan, right, after everything over, right? And but it's actually very meaningful to be able to have a bedside service, to do this ritual while your loved one is still alive, right, nearing the transition and birth in the Pure Land. Because, right, this is an appreciation service, right? It's called Rinju Gongyo. And the service is, right, made available to families who have members whose death is considered imminent. It's an opportunity to express gratitude for having them in their lives and to help ease the transition from this life to the Pure Land. Right? The service allows a loved one and a family member and family members to say goodbye, right, through hearing the Dharma. Yeah, I can, it's so meaningful. I've done many services right before someone passes, and it's an opportunity, a beautiful opportunity for that individual to be able to hear the chanting of the sutra, right? To be able to hear the Dharma, to be able to hear of Amida's compassion, but also, most importantly, is to hear, right, the words of aloha, the words of love from loved ones, right, and to be able to hear that love, to embrace them in that moment of transition, right? And that is a special moment to be able to, a very sacred moment, to be able to hold space for a family to be able to begin that process of saying goodbye. There have been many times when I've done an appreciation service like this, and and the loved one either passes away during the service or shortly after or a few days after, but there is a real sense of peace, a real sense of transition, and a comfort for the family and the individual, right? And so I encourage people, right, to think about holding an appreciation service, before someone passes away, because it's a lot more meaningful. I remember a time I was working with another family some years ago, and their mother was in the ICU at a hospital, and she was near death, and so I was trying to encourage them to why don't we gather the family, and and so that everyone can be there together, and then we could have the service, right, and to begin that process of saying goodbye. However, they weren't ready to say goodbye, and they weren't comfortable, and so they said, we don't want her to know, that that she was transitioning, but I mean, we all know that she knew, and so but these services, right, and our role, and how do we care for family, right, is about helping them to feel comfort and to be embraced and to be able to begin those next steps, with a greater sense of peace, a greater sense of comfort, and so so I encourage you, right, think about having a service before someone passes away, because um, it's a quite special time, quite meaningful, and these rituals, right? We understand how important rituals are to our lives, um, because rituals can be healing, right? And they can offer comfort, and a way to process complex emotions, complex feelings, and to begin focusing our thoughts, focusing our lives and our spiritual lives, on the process of grieving and bereavement. And so in our Shin Buddhist tradition, right, we all know this famous song, right? Mihotokini, Irakarete. And it's often sung or played at our funerals. And really the last stanza, right? It goes through this, helps us to offer comfort, right? To know that our loved one is embraced by the Buddha, by Amida Buddha, that our loved one has become Buddha, right, in the Pure Land, that they, and so we revere them, right, as one with Amida, right? This is the promise, right, of Amida, to embrace, never to abandon, and when our lives, right, our mortal lives come to an end, we attain birth in the Pure Land, right? We become Buddha, we become one with dynamic wisdom and compassion, right? But in Buddhism, we also believe that, right, our loved ones are never very far from us, because being part of wisdom and compassion, right, the dynamic working of Amida Buddha, always embracing us, always sustaining our lives, right, our loved ones are always present, always with us, right, in the voicing of Namo Amida Butsu. We know that we are one with the Buddha, we are one with our loved ones. There's a famous poem, right? I think I read it in Taitetsu Uno's book, River of Fire, River of Water, and it's a way of understanding and remembering our loved ones. And it says, if you miss me, say Namo Amida Butsu, for I too live in the 6 letters. If you miss me, say Namo Amida Butsu, for I too live in the 6 letters. Right? So here, right, our loved ones are never far from us, never apart from us. Right? So we can always know that we as we pass on from this world too, we will always be with those we love. We will always be part of their lives, sustaining their lives through the working, right, of Namo Amida Butsu. And so, you know, thank you for taking this brief moment to talk story and to listen. And let's have a short discussion. If you have things you'd like to talk about or questions, I'm happy to have a conversation.
Reverend Blaine,
Yes.
this is Donna.
Hi, Donna.
Takashi. Hi. I'm glad you shared that guidebook from Kona Hongwanji. I'm wondering, does each temple have its own guidebook? I know Moilili does, and the bereavement committee at Moilili kind of takes care of that, and we make additions or whatever. But does each temple have one?
I think most temples have some version of that.
Okay.
You know, I believe so. I know there's other ministers here. I know Hilo Honganji has, I believe. I think Reverend David, you have one, I think, right? So.
Oh, Higa Sensei.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yes. The Hiro Betsuin also has a funeral guidebook. Then, when we have a funeral counseling, we always give it to the family. Yeah, and explain the meaning of services. Yeah, with the family members.
Yeah, Reverend Blaine, we have here at Mililani Hongwanji also.
Yeah, right. You know, these type of guidebooks are so helpful, right, to families to explain, right, our rich tradition, right? What are the rituals? What are the processes, right, of of bereavement, right, and and just basic information about, how can the teachings help us to, help families, right, during this very difficult time. So yeah, I think it's important to be able to. Oh, and then thank you, Reverend Hasebe. Yes, Hawaii Bedside has one too. So yeah, I think most temples do. So.
And I could be wrong, but that bedside appreciation service, wasn't that maybe a new addition?
Oh, it's been around for a while, but I don't think it's really been emphasized, right? So,
okay, that's what my understanding is.
Yeah. But I know that some years back, when we were doing, I think some of this end of life discussions, right? I think some of you were part of that, right? That we were talking about the appreciation service, right, as an important ritual, right, as a meaningful ritual, not just coming after someone dies, right? So.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes just logistically, it's sometimes easier, right, to be able to gather loved ones together, right, and plan for that before someone passes. Versus, the one family I was talking about, they ended up calling me at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and so had to go to the hospital at 2 in the morning, right, and then so family members had to rush down, and and we've all been through this, right, before, and it can be very stressful, right, to kind of gather family and to get everything together, and is everyone here, and so the appreciation service, right, before someone passes, is a great opportunity to be able to plan right ahead, right, just as we're talking about, right, spiritual wills, talking about these types of advanced care planning, right, this is another aspect of that. Plan ahead, right, simply, right, just say, but it's also a recognition, right, that okay, either my time has come, or your caregiver saying, okay, we're ready to start saying goodbye, right? So it's really this conversation to have with loved ones of what your wishes are, right? Like my temple member who requested a bedside service, right? So important.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or thoughts of your own planning or wishes? Oh, thank you. Is it Uriel, Sharon, Cami? Thank you for your question in the chat. Absolutely. I think it's important for family and loved ones to be together, to be able to say goodbye, right, and to be able to experience, right, the reality and the truth of life, and that death is not something to be feared. Death is not something that is separate from our living. You know, in the West, you know, I think too often we try to minimize, right, our understanding or our contact, right, with death or impermanence. But in Buddhism, right, death is just a natural part of human existence that enables us to enrich our lives, right, in the present. And so I think it's important to be able to, you know, to guide, you know, our children, to be able to share with them these truths of life, right? And the bedside service can be a wonderful way to, right, to be able to start saying goodbye, right, to be able to express appreciation, to express love for someone. So right, thank you. Yeah, you know, we also, right, in the West, there's so many things, right, we try to do, right, anti-aging, anti-this, all, you know, you know, and yet we still age, right? We still get sick, and we still die. You know, and I think Buddhism offers, right, practical understanding and practical wisdom for to understand these things, that they shouldn't be feared, right? That they are, once we let go of fear of these things, right, that's when suffering is lessened. That's when we can understand how to live well, right? Knowing that our lives are impermanent. How do we care for ourselves? How do we care for others, right? How do we make the most of our time here in this present moment? Right? What a wonderful way to live. I think, you know, Gomonshu Kojun Otani, in one of his writings, talks about how, you know, he was, you know, referencing this idea, right? You know, life is impermanent, and yet how can we live each moment as if today was the first day of our life, as if today could possibly be our last, right? And if we can live with knowing that we have lived well, is that not a great way to live with whatever time we have? Right? So being able to enrich our lives in the present, that's really the Buddhist teaching, right? Is to, you know, because, you know, at least in Shin Buddhism, right, we don't have to worry about what comes after, right? We have to worry about our lives now, right? And how do we live? How well do we live? So, and that's what the teachings offer us, a way of living compassionately, living with kindness and gratitude, right? For this present life, for whatever we have, whatever time we have. Any other thoughts or questions?
Reverend Blaine, is it similar to the phrase or thought Ichigo, Ichie?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I think that, right, that Buddhism, right, is pointing us to this idea, right? To this idea of Ichigo Ichie, right? Of making each moment count, right? Of appreciating each moment of our lives. So. I'm not sure if any of the ministers online have anything to share about, working with families or any other wisdom for end of life. Don't make me call on you. Reverend David.
I knew you were going to call me. You know, I'll speak through experience. Just late last night, I had a family member give me a call, and as Reverend Higo was talking about, this idea of the Dinju Gongyo service, to appreciate life before someone passes away. This person had been unresponsive for the past 2 weeks, hasn't been eating or drinking. And yet when we went through this ritual, and everybody said their thank yous, I love yous, and their goodbyes, amazingly enough, this person had enough strength to tell everybody else, thank you and I love you. And so, it has a healing and it has a starting process to the grieving process. And you really don't want to leave life with any regrets. So as Reverend Higa says, we do highly encourage you to have these services. And, I always tell the families, my phone is on 24/7 and we'll try to accommodate you folks at any time.
Thank you, Reverend David. Takashi Sensei, did you want to say something?
Yes, Higa Sensei, can I share my thoughts?
Yes.
First of all, Higa Sensei, thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. It's really great. Then, I saw the comment, do you think it is good for children to attend the bedside services? After seeing that comment, I remembered some of my experience, and I hope I can share it here. When I was 24 years old, my grandpa passed away. So I parted from my grandpa. Then I have 2 younger brothers. Then my youngest brother was 15 years old at that time. Then 3 of them attended the bedside service together. Then I felt very sad, but surprisingly, the youngest brother said, I'm okay. I'm listening to the Buddha Dharma. Then I was so surprised at hearing from that. Because he didn't, that he always attended the services, but I don't think he studied Buddhism, but he was saying, I'm okay because I listen to the Dharma. Then in Japan, maybe the custom is a little bit different. My grandpa passed away at the hospital. Then before his body was sent to the mortuary, first, his body came back to my home first. Then after that, his body was sent to the mortuary for cremation. Then the night he passed away, his body came home, and my youngest brother said, "Oh, today I will sleep in the same room with I will sleep with my departed grandpa. He just became a Buddha. I hardly have a chance to sleep with a person who just became a Buddha." I was so surprised at that time. He was 15 years old then. I didn't have that kind of idea. Then today, Higa Sensei, talked about, birth, in the Pure Land. Then So of course, it's very hard for all of us to accept the reality that we experience separations. But actually, that Jodo Shinshu Buddhism certainly gives us the new viewpoint, another point of view, which gives us the comfort. Yeah. Then thanks to Higa Sensei's lecture and the comment, do you think it's good for children to attend bedside services? I totally think it's good for children to attend bedside services, and I wanted to share my personal thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei. I don't know if Hasabe Sensei or Kawagu Sensei have any thoughts to share.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Blaine Sensei, and it was really wonderful lecture. And I was thinking about the experiences I had in my past bedside services, and especially for the Rinju Gongyo, the people is still kind of descending, yeah. And then when I think about it, it's really makes me every time it's really kind of moves me and touch me is many people when they listen the chanting, their faces kind of looks really relaxed, and then even the many family members reach out to me and they said that like because of the chanting, or maybe while you were there as a minister, but I think basically the sound of the chanting is really soothing the person sometime. And it's nothing about my power, and I don't have any kind of power, but that's the like 110,000 years of the sutra we are still reciting. And then this is just I don't know how I can explain it, but I always feel it's really beautiful, or maybe like even like we don't know the meaning, and then but still the sutra touches people's lives and then have a great power to comfort them. So that's as my experience, I really feels about about the power of the sutra. And then yeah, that's what I was thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei. I don't know if Kawagu Sensei, you have anything to share?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Yes. Okay. Regarding bedside service, after I came to Hawaii, sometimes some people ask me, when should we have bedside service? After someone die or before someone die? So I recommend, if possible, please call me before someone die, because the meaning of bedside service is we chant sutra, or we recite the Nembutsu Namo Amida Butsu instead of the person who is dying. But when I think about our founder Shinran Shonin, his disciples were also chanting sutras, reciting the Nembutsu instead of Shinran Shonin. So we should follow, and I follow his style, and I recommend people, if they want to bedside service, I ask them, please call me before someone is dying. Someone died. So, but anyway, And most cases, when I officiate bedside service, I can see, how can I say? I can see many people feels comfortable, or many people feels comfortable because of, as Reverend Hasebe said, because of sutra chanting, thanks to sutra chanting, they feel they look happy, and they look comfortable. So, yeah. How can I say? Yeah, so but anyway, if someone asks me when we should have a bedside service, so I nowadays I always recommend before someone die. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank
Sorry
you,
about
thank
that.
you, thank you, Sensei. Yeah.
Reverend Blaine,
Oh, yes.
this is Donna again.
Yes, Donna.
One of the right now I'm the president of Molili Hongwanji BWA. So I'm because of the pandemic we don't meet in person too often. So I've been using the internet in communicating to our members, and and many times I'm the one who fields the idea that a certain member, our member or our BWA friends has passed away. And I always look, of course, at the age of the person. And knowing that our own membership has been aging, I've been feeling sometimes reluctant or to share it with our older members. You know, not all of our older members are on the internet. Many of our older members don't have the internet. So when I'm sharing it, I can write it in a narrative. But I've been, you know, I zoom in on Sunday services and I'll see my friend, and you know, age-wise, she's not that much older than the person who died. So I'm feeling sometimes torn about sharing that so and so passed away. Do you have some thoughts on this?
I think, yeah. Oh, actually, what's your hesitation of sharing, Donna?
It's only because I'm telling that person, maybe she died at the age of 97. And here I'm telling a person who's 95, you know, the age-wise. I know that person's going to find out,
Yeah.
you know, eventually, of course. And
Yeah.
but I just feel like, oh, wow, we have members who died at the age of 102. You know, we have an aging membership, and they've lived a long life, you know. But just to share that information, of course we all do that. We look at the age, you know.
Right. I don't think we should be afraid of
I
sharing that,
know.
right? Of that information.
At the end,
Yeah.
I'm still doing it.
Yeah. Right. I know.
I know the answer to my
Yeah.
own question.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you said. You know the answer to your own question.
The I talk story with some of my older members, and you know, you know, and we mentioned, oh, we have so and so's funeral coming up, or so and so just passed away, and you know, and then said, oh, and then you know, one of my members, she's quite old, and but then quite healthy, and but then she said, oh, you know, we all have to go, you know, so. So you know, there's that, you know, kind of real kind of basic kind of wisdom, yeah, that you know, but hard to accept, yeah. I think that's the thing, right? You know, in our we all see ourselves, right? We all see and feel, right, our own, you know, our own mortality, right? And but that's the hardest thing to accept, right? So but yeah, I think that's why, you know, that we're so lucky to have the Dharma, right? That helps us to see life a little bit clearer, right? And to not be afraid of death, you know, ultimately, not to be afraid of change, right? Because death is the ultimate change, right? Ultimate impermanence of life. And so, but what we also understand is that we are not alone on this journey, right? Just like, you know, Donna, you are, you know, wanting to share, or not, or wanting to or need to share, right, what is happening with our members, with our sangha members, right, our fellow travelers, right? You know, that's part of being sangha, right? Is we share in this journey together, right? So, and that's important, that's powerful, right? To be able to rely on each other as sangha, right? Especially in times of difficulty. So.
You know, I do want to take it out of the spiritual side for a little bit. And one thing, even I had the hesitancy also, because I've seen situations in temples getting caught in which they've shared a member, and actually it wasn't the member, you know, it's somebody totally different. So, you know, these people, the members are calling this family and said, no, he didn't pass away. He's sitting right here watching television. So sometimes, you know, I understand the hesitancy. What I often tell people is, you know, contact the family first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe the family doesn't want you to advertise somebody's passing, and let them have this time of grief by themselves. So while it's good to talk about, also kind of just got to remember Hawaii is a little small, so you don't want to kill off the wrong person.
Excellent advice, Reverend David. Yeah, very true. Yeah. So, well, I did want to mention, right, that, you know, we're talking about bedside service, right, and that all bedside service, right, in today's world can also be done virtually, right? People don't have to be together in the same room, and you can bring in family and loved ones from wherever to participate and to share. You know, I've done several bedside services. I was the only person on the camera, and the loved ones were at the bedside, you know, with their iPhone or smartphone, and you know, we did the service that way, right? And the person was on a different island, right? So it allows us, technology, right, allows us the ability to connect people in amazing ways that we haven't had before, right? And to be able to share the Dharma and to connect families and loved ones, right, in that sacred moment. So. Oh, I know there was a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on animal companions such as dogs? Many people see their pets as family, and grief during illness and loss is sincere. Absolutely, right? We know our animal companions are definitely part of our families, right? They are like bodhisattvas to us, right? And you know, I know here, you know, we used to hold an annual pet memorial or pet appreciation service to be able to remember pets who've passed, but also to appreciate pets in our lives who are still living, and you know, and would have a service outside, and we'd bring them people can bring their dogs and cats and bunny rabbits, and and we celebrate, right, those companions, right, right, in the in our teachings, right, there are the Jataka tales, right, the animal wisdom stories, right, of the Buddha, right. The Buddha took many forms in previous lives, and these stories, right, we know these animals wisdom stories share lessons, right, from Buddhism, right, with us, and the Buddha takes the form of animals, right, and so what can we learn, right, from our animals, right? We learn, right, unconditional love, right? We learn just a pure sense of companionship, right, without judgment, right? So as long as we feed them, right? So, but absolutely, right? Our animal companions are very much part of our families, and they, and it's important to remember them, right, and to celebrate their lives, because they are such a big part of our lives. So thank you for that question. Any other thoughts? Yeah, so we're still trying to contact Hope, not sure what happened. So I don't know if Gail, you're able to reach Hope? So I don't know if,
No, I haven't. Let me continue to try. I haven't been
Okay.
successful.
Okay. So, if there are no other, if there's any last questions at this point, or any points of discussion, if not, we can take like a 5-minute break to see if we can reach Hope. So
Reverend Blaine,
yes, Ellen, hi.
put a comment in the chat,
Oh yeah.
keeping a personal journal.
Oh
Would
yeah.
that come under social wills?
Yes, I think that's important. Yeah, that'd be that's a great idea, right? To write down your thoughts, right? What is it that is meaningful to you, right? When we talk about spiritual wills, right? So, right, and that's actually very helpful, right? If right, as you write down and share your like favorite poems, favorite songs, or things that are meaningful to you, right? That your loved ones can go to, right? And to remember you by, right? Right. Sometimes we play, right, favorite songs at funeral services, and favorite songs help people to connect to their loved ones, or a favorite poem or a passage or reading or something, and these are all very meaningful things, and they share values, right? They share life lessons, and what's meaningful, and that's important in our lives, right? To be able to share those with our loved ones, especially our children and grandchildren, right? And so when I do funeral consultations and with families, right, I really want to know, right, who was your loved one, right? Who was, what was the essence of their life? What will you remember the most of their presence in your life, right? What were the values that were important to them, right? What were the things that brought them joy? And what will you hold on to, right? And take with you in your life. So, I think having these conversations with loved ones are important, right? So they know that, because, right, we are, right, in November, right, we will be celebrating Eitaikyo, observing Eitaikyo. And we know Eitaikyo, right, is, the perpetual chanting of sutra, right? Like Reverend Hasebe was mentioning, right, that we've been chanting the same sutras for thousands of years, right? Buddhism began as an oral tradition, and the teachings were passed on through orally, right, from by reciting the teachings. And so, the chanting of sutra, right, is this passing on of the teachings, right? But also, right, sharing family stories, sharing your values, sharing your spiritual understanding is also right? This idea of eitaikyo, of passing on, right? Your appreciation of the Buddha Dharma, your appreciation of the Nembutsu teaching to your loved ones, right? Because the Dharma truly is passed on from heart to heart and from mind to mind, right? From our lived experience, from our lives, from your lives, right? And how you appreciate and how you share that is the most meaningful way, right, of learning and passing that on. And absolutely, advanced care planning, important to take care of your own medical, legal, other things like that. But also, right, the spiritual aspects of how do you want to be cared for when your time is near? What will bring you comfort and peace, right? And what is it that you want to leave with your loved ones? What lessons, right? So,
This Blaine?
yes. Hello?
Sorry about that.
Oh, Amy, hi, yes.
Yes, I'm Amy Hamani, and I'm with Community First Hawaii. It's the organization that Barry Taniguchi from
Yes.
KTA began. And I belong to the committee that does Advanced Healthcare Directive presentation on the Big Island. I know Hope Young very well. I'm sorry that, you know, she hasn't been able to connect so far, but if I may, could I tell you a little bit about what we're doing here?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, on the Big Island, we've been doing Advanced Healthcare Directive workshops for 3-4 years. And with the pandemic, we have started doing them by Zoom, just like this presentation. I'm really impressed that you're now promoting these appreciation services, because having a conversation is so important. And that's the gist of what we are presenting. In our workshop, we actually help people complete their Advanced Healthcare Directive by going step by step through the document. But we also emphasize how important it is to talk to your family. I think it's fantastic that you're promoting conversations about how much we appreciate our loved ones, and talking about planning for wishes near the end of life is so important in helping the family know and understand what their loved one wants in terms of healthcare when they're near the end of life. I think this becomes even more important during these pandemic times, to be able to talk about how we want to be treated medically when we're near the end of life. So if anybody is interested in participating in our workshop, we have one coming up next week, Tuesday, on November 2nd, from 9 to 10:15 in the morning. And you can register for this workshop by going to communityfirsthawaii.org. So that's communityfirsthawaii.org. And you know, we want to help people to complete their Advanced Healthcare Directive. And we do this step by step through the document. And thank you so much for letting me share that information. But I am very impressed to hear about all you are doing to help families understand and approach this end of life situation.
Thank you so much, Amy. I've put the Community First website in the chat, so you can check that out also. Yeah, it's a wonderful resource on the Big Island, helping people to deal with advanced healthcare directives and that type of planning. So, right. But what I think what Amy was mentioning is really important, right? That it's not just about having advanced healthcare directive, not just about putting it down and then leaving it somewhere, right? In your, it's about having the conversation with your loved ones. Right,
Yes.
it's about
Yes.
it's so important, right? It's not just having the paper, because when the time comes, your loved ones really need to know your wishes and to be able to understand what is it that you hope and desire for your care at end of life, because and we've all experienced some difficulties, right? When that time comes, sometimes, and some families experience immense difficulties when people don't agree, right, of what care should be, right? And so an advanced healthcare directive is so important to help to be able to put on paper, right, your wishes. However, you also need to talk about that. This is why I don't want this type of treatment. This is why I want this thing. This is why, right? So that people understand, or people are comfortable with those choices and those decisions. So your wishes can be honored, right, above all else. So
Exactly. You're so correct. Yes.
Right. I know, Gail, you had wanted to share your personal story, actually, about
Blaine,
yes.
Jeanette is on the phone with me and she's
Okay.
trying to log in.
Oh, okay.
Jeanette Kojay.
Yes, wonderful.
So
Thank you.
she can do that part. Now, do you have the document?
Yeah, let me try and pull the
Pull it up.
Yep.
Okay, Blaine has the document, Jeanette. Okay. Jeanette will log into you and she can do the presentation. I'm not exactly sure. We're not able to get in touch with Hope.
Oh, okay. I hope she's okay.
I hope so too. I'm not sure what's happening.
So good morning. Hi, Blaine. Hello,
Hi, good morning.
everyone.
Good morning, Jeanette.
I will tell you, I'm worried. Hope and I talked about this yesterday. So, and I apologize. I was in yoga. I was meditating. That's why I wasn't here. So I have now logged on. Do you have the slides, Blaine?
Yes, let me pull it up actually. Hold on.
Okay, great. I'll tell you what, I'm getting a glass of water. I have not disappearing. I'm with you guys. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay, let me share. It's in a PDF form, this one, so I'll just be scrolling through it for you. So, or
Great.
you can, yeah.
No problem. So, so taking a deep breath and beginning again. So Blaine, how much time do we have? And
our session is supposed to go till noon. So I just finished my session. So you have the rest of this time till noon. So yeah, I'm not sure if anybody needs to take a short break since we've been kind of on since 9 o'clock this morning. Does anybody?
I was just going to say bio breaks are always good.
Anybody want to take like a 5-minute break and then we can kind of start in about 5 minutes?
And that would actually give me a chance to look through the slides.
Sure thing. Actually, why don't we do that? Let's come back in about 5 minutes. So thank you, everybody.
Sounds good. Okay, everybody stand up, go move around and come back and talk to us. Okay, Yeah, Blaine, I don't know what to say. Hope and I discussed this yesterday, and I know she was planning to be here. So now, of course, I'm worried. But
Yeah.
okay, Jane, I'm the exec. My name's Jeanette Kojane. I'm the executive director of Kukuamau, and we are very pleased that we have an ongoing partnership with Hongwanji around the state, and we are the Hongwanji are very have been very big supporters of Kukuamau, but it's also very clear there's a lot of overlap. And again, I'm sorry that I missed Blaine's talk, but I look forward to hearing about it again. Okay, now it's just me. Good. So this morning, we're going to talk about navigating serious illness and end of life options. Okay, next slide, please. So Ira Byock is one of our heroes. In case you folks haven't read his books, he has amazing books. He's a hospice and palliative care doctor, spoken actually many times in Hawaii. And his book, Best Care Possible, I have here on my shelf. He says, modern medicine has yet to make even one person immortal. Therefore, at some point, more treatment does not equal better care. Next slide, please. And I think it's always so important to remember we cannot change the outcome, but we can affect the journey. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Some of the resources and information that are available to us. And I think it's great that you folks are here and also know that you can look to Kukuamau as a resource. So next slide, please. So Kukuamau is a statewide organization. We're a coalition that has been in existence for over 20 years here in Hawaii. And we look to do several things. We want to make conversations about advanced care planning and serious illness and care and support the cultural norm. We want to put people with serious illness at the center of the conversations, make sure their loved ones feel supported, that the people that take care of them also have the resources and the tools to do that well. And then we look at systems change. How can we change policy? How can we change legislation in order to raise all boats? So we put people at the middle of what we do, and I hope that you'll visit our Kukuamau website. We have lots of great information. Feel free to sign up for our free newsletter that tells you about things that are going on. We also have a speakers bureau, a Let's Talk Story program, which this is a part of, and my friend Gail Okata is part of that, and she's going to speak later so that we can get the word out around the state. Through Zoom, it's actually much easier to do things on the Big Island, so that we are always very open to that. We do trainings and outreach and all sorts, try and get resources to professionals as well. So if you or someone you know is a healthcare professional, please have them connect with Kukuamau. So I am so glad to be talking with you. Our movement to improve care exists because of the coalition of people like you who are working on this issue. Okay, next slide, please. So Blaine, yeah, I don't know if you can make that run. It looks like there's a little thing there. I couldn't get it to work on my side.
No, I can't. It's a PDF, that's why. So I think
Exactly. Let's just carry forward. It also didn't work on my screen. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is palliative care. So have you guys been using the chat room at all? Are folks good at the chat room?
Yeah, people have been putting things in chat during my session.
Great. So yeah. Again, I want people to be alert and participate. So I would love it if you, now that you've heard palliative care, what do you think, what's one word or two words that come up when you hear palliative care? You could put that into the chat room because we're going to talk about what palliative care is, because there's often a lot of misunderstanding. So I'm hoping people will be brave since I can't see you anymore. There we go. Honoka'a, Hongwanji, excellent. Pain relief. Anybody else? Comfort care, keeping one comfortable, excellent. So palliative care is a type of care that supports a person and their loved ones with serious illness. It is a, this slide actually has a typo. It says using palliative for life-limiting illness. We actually like to say serious illness because no one really has a crystal ball to figure out if some people get better when we weren't expecting it, and sometimes the opposite happens. So we talk about serious illness. Palliative care looks at optimizing quality of life, maximizing community supports, early symptom management, and good advanced care planning. That's a really important topic that we work on. Next bubble in is end of life care. This is often confused with, so hospice then is at the very end of life. Palliative care is much earlier in the disease process. And actually with palliative care, you can still be getting curative treatments, but it will come in and the team will come in to help you manage physical symptoms, emotional suffering. We like to say the stress and suffering of serious illness. That's what palliative care can do. And with palliative care, you can get it at the same time as curative treatments. Hospice care is towards the very end of life, and then no more curative treatments are possible. But the team approach is still the same. And then again, the last hours, last days and hours, there is a lot of support that goes on. So next slide, please. So palliative care is actually specialized medical care for people with serious illness. It focuses on relief from the symptoms and stress of a serious illness. It is, and the goal is to improve quality of life. So palliative care team is usually going to be a doctor, a nurse, social worker, chaplain, and other specialists who are going to work with the person's other physicians. So we like to think of it as an extra layer of support. You don't give up anything. As a matter of fact, you get more. You get another team that is helping to manage the stress. And the needs that are taken care of with palliative care are based on what the patient needs. If it's pain management, that's one thing. If it's spiritual stress, if it's social issues, support for family, respite, things like that, it's all based on what the patient and their loved ones need. So it can start at any age. We have pediatric palliative care, and with any stage in a serious illness. And then importantly, it is also provided alongside with curative treatment. Okay, so that's the official definition. Next slide, please. So the word palliative, it's a Latin word, but meaning to ease the symptoms without curing the underlying conditions. So as someone said, it's similar to hospice, but it's often confused with hospice. So hospice is fabulous. There are 3 wonderful hospices on the Big Island. Hospice is at the very end of life when no more curative treatments are being tried. Palliative care can happen much earlier upstream where curative treatments can be involved. So please understand that while they're similar, there are differences. And again, you can get palliative care earlier. Next slide, please. So people always ask, okay, how do I know when palliative care is right for me, for my loved one? What should I be looking for? These are a couple of flags. Frequent ER visits or called to the doctor. If you hear somebody saying, oh, my mom was in the hospital 3 times last month, ooh, big red flag. If my mom was in the hospital 3 times in the last year, that's a big flag. Calling the doctor often. Difficulty managing medications. This is another one. Sometimes people have, 27, I think my dad had 17 different meds towards the end of his life. It's complicated, and you often feel these things are working against each other. That's another specialty of palliative care. Thinking about some of these activities of daily living, people need extra support. Things like pain, fatigue, swelling in the feet, legs, nausea, constipation, diarrhea, shortness of breath, all those kinds of symptoms. Those are things that palliative care can help with, whether it's the underlying disease or, for instance, the results of chemotherapy or cancer treatment. Next slide, please. So theoretically, palliative care should begin at the time of diagnosis with a serious illness and carry on throughout the disease. And we actually have seen that people with, sometimes people who get palliative care live longer, but we definitely see that their quality of life is very high. So we want people to figure out what palliative care is available and to access it as early as possible. Next slide, please. So why palliative care? The concept of upstream is really important. We all know this, though, with prevention. If we're going to prevent a crisis, we need to get involved early. So be thinking about palliative care as someone has a serious diagnosis, and as some of these issues appear, be thinking about palliative care, asking for a palliative care consult from your doctor. So again, we're concentrate on the relief from symptoms and stress of a serious illness, looking at improving the quality of life for both the patient and the family and the loved ones. So when we discuss palliative care cases, it's very important. How is the family doing? How is the wife doing? How are the kids doing? How are the important people in that person's life doing? And did they need extra support? And then finally, this last piece, an extra layer of support. I have never had anyone say to me, "I'm so sorry I called palliative care. I should have waited." People say, "Why did I wait? I should have called earlier." And I will say that is the same thing I hear about hospice. "Oh my goodness, I should have called earlier. I didn't realize that they were going to be doing such a great job to help us out." Okay, so next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, palliative care is this specialized team, doctors, nurses, usually social worker, and a chaplain. So this extra team that comes in has a lot of clinical training to help with what is going on. It's appropriate at any age and stage, and it can be along with curative treatment. So I hope now you have heard this from me. The next slide is a fancy graph, and you can see, for those of us that have helped loved ones with serious illness, that there's ups and downs with curative treatment, but palliative care can be there. And as you see, especially as someone gets sicker and less curative treatments are an option, palliative care and then hospice care can come in. It's also important to say, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about what hospice is, but after someone dies, hospice is also there with bereavement and bereavement support. So I think it's really important to remember, and actually for my dad, when he was quite ill at the end of his life, he didn't really want hospice care. And I said, "Okay, you don't need it for you. I need it for me. I need extra support." My dad was always interested in supporting me. That's what my entire life. So he said, "Oh, if you want me to be on hospice care, that's great." So that's how I got my dad onto hospice care, was to get, to say, I need this support. So next slide talks about where to find palliative care. So I want to say that I would like to enlist all of you in our efforts to increase access to palliative care. We have some palliative care that's available. but we need to increase the access to palliative care. So I think that it's really important that all of us be thinking, okay, who could I call? How can I get the people who take care of me to be providing more palliative care? So there is inpatient palliative care. So for those of you who are in Hilo, there's the Hawaii Care Choices, which is the also provides hospice in Hilo. They have now been working with the Hilo Medical Center to provide palliative care consults. So they actually have something available. I don't think it's available in Kona, although there are physicians there who are very familiar with palliative care, and Waimea as well, working on increasing palliative care. Outpatient, I'm not aware of any outpatient options on the Big Island, but there are outpatient clinics for cancer. And I know some people go back and forth, both at Straub, Polymomi, and at Queens. And there also is an outpatient pediatric clinic. So again, so outpatient means you would come to a clinic, you get treated there, you get care at the hospital, but you are living at home. And then the final piece is the in-home. And that actually is where I think there's the most opportunity for increase, and which we are most excited about doing that, because so many people would like to be at home. They'd like to have their families with them. And so that is actually, for folks in Hilo, Hawaii Care Choices has a wonderful program called the Kupu program. And they also, that helps people. All three of the hospices work with HMSA. People who have HMSA, they have a supportive care benefit. And anyone who's lucky enough to have UHA, they have a concurrent care benefit. And then people who have VA support, that is also available on the Big Island. So be thinking about that. If you have loved ones or you're considering people on other islands, that there are also, and there's a list on our website of where all of that is. But again, it's on our website under where do I find palliative care? So it's on the Kukuamau website. So be thinking it's inpatient, outpatient, and home-based care. I will also say Kaiser is doing quite a lot for supporting people at home with the Switch program. So you can ask about that, and they are talking about how to get more palliative care. Okay, so next slide, please. So here are some myths and facts about palliative care. People think that palliative care is only for pain management. As you've heard from me, pain management is a part of palliative care. So it's part of the interdisciplinary approach that's going to help people with serious illness. Another myth is that palliative care is the same as hospice. Hopefully you've heard from me, with palliative care, people can get curative treatment and not necessarily end of life care, right? So curative treatment, people actually can be in palliative care and then get better and not need it anymore. Palliative care is only for cancer patients. Absolutely not. It's for people who are facing serious illness. It is not based on diagnosis or prognosis. And the last myth is that palliative care means stopping all treatments. So if you go to our website and you like watching videos, we have a couple of good stories of people who were getting cancer treatments at the same time as palliative care, that their heart disease was being managed at the same time as getting palliative care. So you don't have to give up curative treatment. So I hope you hear from this that palliative care is about having more and not less. So you don't have to give anything up. It is this excellent type of care. We often say care the way it should be. Okay, so just, if you go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to talk a little bit about hospice to make sure that people understand hospice. Unfortunately, hospice is also underutilized in our state, and we want people to understand what hospice is. So if you've never heard of Dame Cicely Saunders, she is an amazing woman who is known as the founder of the modern hospice movement. I really love this quote. The way we live, the way we die lives on in the memories of those who survive. And I certainly would say that's the same for me. Both of my parents and my beloved grandmother have died, people that I lived with for many years. They were all three of them in hospice care. I look back on that. I know that they died well. I know they were supported, they were loved, they were cared for. So for me, as the eldest daughter, the dutiful eldest daughter, I know that I did my best by getting my loved ones into hospice care. So next slide is also a video that I doubt we can play, Blaine, right? Let's just carry on. Then there is, so hospice care, this is specialized type of care for people who are facing either a life-limiting or a serious illness. And the physician gives a diagnosis of 6 months or less to live. So it's important to say that yes, hospice cares for people at the end of their life. Having said that, however, I think it's always very important to remember that oftentimes doctors are very hesitant to bring up hospice. And unfortunately, in our state, people are in hospice for about 3 weeks. So people wait and wait and wait. And I hope that today you can hear that that is not the best thing to do. Okay, so hospice care, it's a kind of palliative care. It addresses patients' physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs. It helps the patient's family, the loved ones, and their caregivers. And it usually happens in the patient's home or a home-like setting. So for those of you who live in Hilo, you may know they have a beautiful hospice facility that is just gorgeous, very peaceful, and the rooms are big. Families can stay there. There's space to, there's windows to the outside. You can hear the roosters. It is a lovely place. Kona also has a facility. If people are not able to be cared for at home, they have a home that people can go to. So there are options if people are no longer able to be at home. Next slide, please. So hospice care, like we talked about for with palliative care, it really focuses on the symptoms, managing the symptoms and the suffering that people have. Hospice emphasizes quality of life, and we believe that the quality of life is important as the length of life. Hospice is available on all of the islands, so everywhere in Hawaii, hospice is available. And hospice allows a natural death without unwanted interventions while providing support to the individual and loved ones at the end of life. If anybody has any questions, you can type them in, but otherwise I'm just going to keep going. And then the question is on the next slide, why hospice? So hospice, again, has this team approach: physician, nurse, social worker, aides, spiritual advisor and support, and then bereavement support for loved ones after somebody has gone. So it's a team approach that helps everybody. And these are folks who are experts at caring for people at the end of life. It also helps to avoid unneeded emergency room visits. It helps to avoid hospital stays. And as I mentioned, and with my own story, that hospice supports loved ones after someone has died. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to tell Hope's story for her. When Hope's mom was dying, she was in the hospital, and then she was getting care, and the decision was made that there were no more curative treatments that were going to help. And that was then the time. Hope was her mother's decision maker, her healthcare power of attorney, her agent. And so she was talking with her mom about what what the next steps would be. And Hope said, "Hey, Mom, you have the chance to be in the cool kids club." So Hope's mom was a public school teacher all of her life here in Hawaii. And she said, Cool Kids Club, I want to be a cool kid. And as Hope explains it, as in hospice, the Cool Kids Club, you have a whole team that is going to come and help you. And I know Hope also said it will help me. So there's the hospice nurse. There's a certified nursing assistant. There's a social worker, a chaplain. There are volunteers. There's a medical director. And then also, of course, your family and your friends are part of that team. So Hope said, hey, Mom, do you want to be in the Cool Kids Club? And she said, I want to be in the Cool Kids Club. So that is why I know that Hope uses this expression. And her mother had excellent care while she was in hospice. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when is the time for hospice care? And again, this is a difficult subject, and I appreciate that there's no simple answer. You're not going to hear from me a simple answer, but it is very important to be thinking, how do we call hospice early and not waiting until the last moments of someone's life? So again, if someone's had a lot of visits to the emergency room, a lot of calls to the doctor, if there's been unintended weight loss, if people have had an increase in falls, people have trouble getting out of bed, getting out of chair, people who are sleeping a lot, unable to stay awake. Also things like recurrent infections, skin breakdowns. These are all red flags. And then the decision to stop any sort of curative treatments. These are all flags to be discussing with a physician about hospice and when is the right time for hospice care. Next slide, please. So I think it's really important, and if you're thinking about yourself or you're thinking about your loved ones, it's really important to think about this switch between what matters, what's the matter with me, to what matters to me. What are the most important things for me? And I think all of us have something that would be a little bit different. I remember one person was discussing, she was a physician, palliative care doc, talking with her dad, and her dad said he had an operation coming up, and he said, you know, if I can't eat ice cream and watch football, then life has no meaning for me. But as long as I can eat ice cream and watch football, I'm okay. And she, of course, she was shocked. She thought he was going to want to go fishing, spend time with the grandkids, all of those kind of things. But for him, those were the most important things. So so she could then help to hear what matters to me. Okay, next slide. Now I'd like you to be thinking, if you were faced with a serious illness, with a terminal life-limiting illness, how would you want to spend your time? Where would you want to be? Why don't we just take a deep breath? Maybe close your eyes for a moment and think. Where would I want to be? Who would I want to be with me? What matters to me? So I know Reverend Blaine gave you some things to think about from a Buddhist tradition. I just gave you 10 short seconds there. I hope that when we're done today, you'll think about this. And hopefully you'll be thinking, oh, hospice focuses on quality of life. Of course, that's important. I should learn more about hospice. Where's my nearest hospice? How would I get there? How would I get a referral to hospice? I sort of remember some things Jeanette said. Be thinking about hospice and the emphasis on quality of life. Okay, next slide, please. So these are fabulous pictures of different things that can be happening at the end of life. At the bottom, you know, being with family and friends. The top is the focus on in hospital. Some people really want to do all sorts of curative machine related things until the end, but you can think about what you would choose. And you may notice here there's a horse in one of these pictures. This is actually a real picture from a hospice. Somebody had wanted to say goodbye to his horse, and they figured out how to bring the horse into the hospice to say goodbye. So think about that. Hospice focuses on quality rather than quantity. And you need to think about, what does quality look like for you? Okay, next slide, please. So these are just a couple of myths I'm going to go through more quickly. We've talked about some of these already. Most people think hospice is a place. I don't know how many times people have said, oh, I didn't call hospice because we want mom to stay here with us. Mom can stay there into the, people can, most times people get hospice at home, and that is definitely available all around the state. Loved ones and relatives are part of the team. The hospice does not come in and provide 24/7 care. Hospice supplements what the family and the loved ones are able to do. Please don't think of hospice as a last resort, giving up. That is not what hospice is. Hospice is another layer of support that helps people. Hospice is really the experts at reducing pain, controlling anxiety, helping support with spiritual and emotional issues, and then improving quality of life. So I hope that you don't think about hospice as giving up. Next slide, please. So there is no religious affiliation with hospice. Your minister can come and see you. The chaplains that hospice have will approach things from a spiritual perspective, but not from any one faith tradition. They respect all cultures and points of view, and they can be often super instrumental in helping families with conversations and also disagreements that definitely come up at the end of life. I want to say I find hospice chaplains are so under-recognized as being very important for the care. And I also think one of the things that is often funny is that people will say, well, maybe, I'm sure you've never heard this before, but we have some disagreements in my family. Every family has disagreements. No family is perfect. That's just on TV. No family is perfect. Everybody has hoo-hoo going on. People have things that haven't been said, that have been said too much. People who show up at the last minute trying to save everything. There's long-standing issues. Chaplains can be very helpful with having family meetings and family discussions. Okay, so number 5, hospice is not just for cancer patients. We talked about that. Anyone with a serious or terminal illness. Next slide, please. Hospice is not expensive. Hospice is, in-home hospice care is fully covered under Medicare. It's also fully covered under Medicaid, so that it is not expensive. And my understanding is all of the health plans in the state fully cover in-home hospice. If somebody's in a facility, you have to work out with your health insurance company how much that costs, but they also have special funds for people who can't pay for it. So please do never think about the cost. Call the hospice and discuss it with them. Also, don't think that hospice will stop medications and treatment. That is not the case. What hospice does is that they look at the state-of-the-art medications and palliative treatments to work on the symptoms that the person has. There may be certain things that people in hospice will stop taking. For instance, my dad stopped his cholesterol medicine. He had 2 months to live. That wasn't needed anymore. But his pain management was very specific, and the experts from hospice really helped with that. I've said this before, number 8, please never think about hospice as failure. It's not a failure for the family that we couldn't save somebody. It's not a failure for the healthcare team. It's not a failure for the patient for calling hospice. I'm pretty sure that Reverend Blaine talked about the fact that we all will die sometime, and it's important to recognize when that's happening and to get support throughout people's life. It's all about comfort and dignity in the time that you have left. I like that. Hospice is living well until the time of death. Next slide, please. So don't be thinking hospice speeds up death. As a matter of fact, hospice can actually help people to live longer. I was talking with somebody over in Hilo who runs the facility, and she was telling me a story of the person who was admitted to the facility. There was a big family. Everybody finally got to sleep. The family slept, the patients slept, the family was relieved because other people were in charge. The person got better. The person lived longer than the doctor had thought because this team was involved. So hospice can actually, it is not uncommon at all to have people live longer or to have a bit of a rebound because all of this care is happening. Also, don't be thinking that morphine or other types of pain management are hastening death. That is not the case. The good pain management is really important. Sometimes the pain management will allow somebody to let go and to die peacefully. Other times having pain managed means that someone could live longer. So that is not, that's another myth. And then please do not confuse hospice and palliative care with either euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide or medical aid in dying. That is not, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but this is a very different, the hospice is not about speeding up or hastening someone's death. And it is certainly not about euthanasia. Okay, next slide, please. So remember, it's possible to live well even in the face of serious illness. So there's ways to help with comfort, both physically and mentally, connection, spiritually with family, friends, social support, preparation, thinking, have I gotten things in order? Have I done what I need to do? Getting medical things taken care of. And then the hospice team can really help through a rite of passage. A lot of times people may not have had too many people in their lives die. So families might not know what the process is. And hospice is really important for doing that. So one more slide, and then it's going to be Gail's turn to talk. So please be thinking, whether it's for you or for a loved one, be proactive with learning about treatment options. So getting a difficult diagnosis, a serious diagnosis, is very difficult. Be sure to explore treatment options, discuss with your doctors, and be thinking what matters most to you. I always say, anytime if you have visits to the doctor, always take along, there's a couple of important things: a pen and paper and a friend to listen. And nowadays, take your smartphone to record what the doctor says. Usually when I see the doctor, I don't quite remember what they say either. So record what the doctor has to say, write things down, ask questions so that you feel like you have the complete information. If you're asked to complete a post, if somebody says, I think it's appropriate to have a post is very important. That's great. It's a good thing to do. Ask for a palliative care consult at the same time to understand what the decisions are that come with that post. And then have thoughtful and meaningful conversations about your wishes for care with loved ones, and be sure to complete an advanced healthcare directive. And you have to share that with your provider and your loved ones. So I can't see you all, but I'm going to ask how many of you have completed an advanced directive hopefully everybody's hand goes up. If you haven't, I know, certainly here on, or here, certainly there on the Big Island, Community First in Hilo is really fabulous. They will go out and do talks, but they do talks around the island, and they're also a fabulous resource. So Amy Hamane is a wonderful resource for that. So Community First is on your island, but we here with Kukuamau are also really happy to do with that. So I don't know if people know how to raise their hands, but you can definitely do that. So I'm going to stop and pause. And are there any questions? Because otherwise I would, you can leave it on this slide, Blaine, and then I would ask that Gail Okata jumps in. Any questions? Anybody can raise their hand, or I'm looking if you can see any hands raised, Blaine. I see. Oh, good. There's a question. Yay. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? It looks like Okano. At the bottom, it's, yeah, there you go.
Actually, I raised my hand to answer you about the Advanced Healthcare
Oh.
Directive. I had one done. Thank
Good.
you.
So where, can I ask, where is it?
Well, it started with workshops we've had through the BWA a few
Great.
years ago. And another one was by Amy Hamani.
Mhm.
And we learned about Pulse, advanced healthcare and all that, and, you know, getting our legal stuff in order. So we're
Excellent.
pretty well set right now.
And did you share that with your family and with your doctors?
yes.
Everybody's got a copy.
Right, right. And then
Cool.
we have a green copy on the fridge is where they ask us to put the Pulse. Is that correct?
Exactly. That is correct. That's
Okay.
right.
Thank
You get 2 points.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. How about anybody else? You want to put your hand up, and if you have an advanced directive. If not,
I have a question.
Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm going to a class and listening to this, so I'm multitasking here. But on the palliative care, is that covered by insurance?
So that's the question that you have to ask your insurance provider. So if you have HMSA, they have something called supportive care.
Okay, and that's through
UHA.
hospice too, right?
So let's phrase it this way. If you call the hospice, they have a team that provides palliative care that is separate from the hospice team. But yes, so Hospice of Kona or North Hawaii Hospice, or then Hawaii Care Choices. Hawaii Care Choices has this very large, robust palliative care. They have a very robust palliative care program. In addition to that, which you get through your health insurance company.
So the doctor needs to like prescribe it like anything else, hospice or palliative
Yes, so
care,
this is,
right?
yes. And then what I find is if you go to the doctor and say, I'm interested in this, that relieves the doctor of this burden about, oftentimes doctors worry that the patient's gonna freak out, or they're gonna make people upset by saying, oh, I think we should talk about palliative care, or we're going to talk about hospice. So if you as the patient initiate the conversation, doctor, I'd like to talk about palliative care. You can even do it now proactively. When the time comes, I'd really like to understand about palliative care. When the time comes, I think hospice is going to be a good option for you. I want you to know that. Can we talk about this now? I think that's a good way. That's a good way to go. But, you know, all of the health plans also have case managers, so they can, if the doctor is hesitant, you can help try and figure that out differently. But yes, it is dependent on the type of insurance you have, unfortunately, which is why that was my plea for advocacy. We need people to be lobbying and working with us to get, so if you don't have, you know, if you have United or Ohana or HMAA, I would give them a call and ask how their palliative care program's coming. What would they be able to offer you?
And just one comment, I heard you saying that I guess hospice, you know, if you're under hospice, it's not like the end, and sometimes people live longer. I have a friend's sister-in-law that has dementia, and she went down really fast. Like I saw her in December and she was still talkative. And by February, she was bedridden. And so they said she only had a few days, maybe a week to live. Well, she's still alive and she may not be communicating, but yeah, she's still, you know, husband's feeding her and hospice is in. At a point, hospice said that they may terminate their services because she's not going. You know, so is that true? Because
So
that happened?
It does actually. And if you turn it around, it's a good thing. Sometimes people call it graduating from hospice. And what that means is you are doing so well that you are no longer considered having 6 months or less to live.
Well,
But-
she's not doing well. She's
Yeah, so
almost
that
like
would
a bed-
surprise me based on what you said. I would be surprised. But if you think of it, as long as a physician says you have 6 months or less to live, then you qualify for hospice. So there are people who are in hospice for a couple of years because they're doing okay and hospice is helping them to manage. So you're not kicked out after 6 months. But if somebody actually is doing that much better, not necessarily your friend, it could be that they wouldn't qualify anymore. But that's also where palliative care can come in to help with somebody who doesn't qualify for hospice, but still has serious illness and has the needs like that.
Okay, thank you.
So Lois is asking a question I'm trying to understand. So what I meant was that you need a diagnosis of a serious illness in order to get palliative care. So you would need to have heart disease, kidney disease, lung issues. There's a number of different diseases. It doesn't, but it should cover any number of serious disease diagnoses. So it's not just one, it's not just cancer, or it's not just heart disease. So it's available for people who have any number of serious illness. Also, oftentimes, unfortunately, we know that people have many things that are together. So that's when palliative care comes in. So again, I would encourage you to talk to your doctor. I will give you a heads up. Sometimes doctors are misunderstanding what palliative care is versus hospice. So feel free to send them to the Kukuama website. There's good materials there. I'm always happy to talk to doctors about what palliative care actually is and what's available. Or as somebody mentioned before, you can have them call the hospice that's near you and talk to the medical director. So you may need to be advocating on your own behalf about helping people to understand what palliative care actually is.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh, there's Lois. Okay, cute picture. Got it. Was that clear, Lois?
Sort of.
Sort
Not
of?
quite understand. Yeah. Because I think, if you have heart problems or whatever, those are all diagnoses.
So I'm saying you do need a diagnosis of a serious illness.
Right.
But what I mean is
Okay.
like you would need to have heart disease or kidney disease, cancer, serious and a more advanced stage, but it wouldn't, but the palliative care comes and deals with the issues that people have. So if somebody doesn't have pain, you're not going to be treated for pain. And it depends just what the person needs. If the family support is fine, then they wouldn't need that piece. So, but yes, you do need a diagnosis. So your doctor will have given you a diagnosis, and that's why you talk with your doctor to get a consult to get the palliative care.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so I see Amy Hamane is on the call, so waving at Amy's letter there. So Community First is a fabulous organization and always ready to help. So Gail, are you there?
Yes,
Yay.
I'm here.
So Gail, you're gonna tell a story, right?
Yes. My name is Gail Okata, and Hope asked if I would share this story about my friend Andy. I'm going to try to see if I can show this picture. You can see this? Sorry. This is Andy, my friend Andy. He has an I love you. In any event, Andy recently ended up in the hospital in the ICU at Tripler. And when he went in, the doctors asked him, do you have family members or friends that are close to you who can speak to you in case you are not capable of responding to us? And he said, my mother died. I have no one. The doctor fortunately persisted. Day 2, the doctor asked again, Andy, do you have anyone? Andy said, I have no one. Finally, day 3 came around and Andy relented. He gave them my name and told them that I was at the Mo'iliili Hongwanji. So I went there. Fortunately, when they called the Hongwanji, Emma called Reverend Bert Sumikawa, and I called my friend Ann Nakata. And the 3 of us went up to Tripler to see Andy. Now he was in isolation, so we needed to communicate through him with the intercom. And he also was on his side facing away from the door, so he could not see us. So we very loudly said, Andy, I love you. Each of us said, Andy, I love you. And he could hear what he said. And he got the social worker to come and bring in a notary public and gave me power of attorney to speak on Andy's behalf when he was not capable. He loudly said, when we were talking with the notary and the social worker, I do not want to be a vegetable. We very clearly heard that. The doctor and I very clearly heard that. So the very next day, Ann Nakata, our friend Ann, went home and she made this slide to show Andy how much he was a part of our, the slides from Hope didn't. So I'm gonna show this to you. Hopefully, I don't know if you can see, but these are all pictures of Andy when he participated in during Mo'iliili services. So you can see that he was our Santa Claus. His friends went over when he graduated from the university. So he was very much a part of the Mo'iliili family. And yet he said, I have no one. And the doctor said that shortly after we visited that night, he looked like he was getting better, but inevitably he slid downhill. And the doctor called and said, will you come? And I knew what it was going to be, the conversation. So I called Reverend Bert and said, will you come with me? And he did. And the doctor and I had this conversation about end of life. And he said, Andy agreed. And I said, yes. Andy said loudly, I do not want to be a vegetable. And so the doctor recommended that they not resuscitate him. And I agreed. And so they put him on what we call a no code status, which says if you stop breathing, they weren't going to take heroic measures to resuscitate you. So what Reverend Burt did was he put on a red piece of paper, which is called a myogo, and on it has the words Namo Amida Butsu. And he told the nurse, please put this paper on Andy's chest. So they put it on Andy's chest, and through the window of the isolation room, Reverend Burt chanted the Sambutsuge. We left, Andy died that night. I wanted to share, and then we had his funeral, and we were very pleased to find that he had many, not only many Moilili Hongwanji supporters who wanted to say goodbye at Punch Bowl to him, but there are many Trump supporters that he demonstrated at the in front of the state capitol, and that they came to visit him. And let me show you. You remember his sign with his flag, I love you and be kind. He was there at the Capitol and met many people who wanted to come and say goodbye to him. And they were all, including Andy, were Trump supporters. So as you can see, Andy had many friends. And yet, when they told him that, do you have anyone? He said, I have no one. I share this story with you because we did not think to ask Andy or even have this conversation with him about your choice. Were you to get to the end of your life and were you to be hospitalized and not be able to speak for yourself? I think that there are many people in the church who either are single or who have children who are far away and not very close to them, who are in this situation. And if you know them, I'd like to ask that you step up. You have private conversations with them. And please talk about if they would like to have you as their spokesperson, should they ever get into such a position. I just recently, after Andy did that, called a friend of mine and said, you know, would you like for me to be your spokesperson? And she said, oh, yes. And if it wasn't for that, we would not have had this conversation. So I really would encourage you to look around at members and family and friends, and please, please have this conversation with people who think that they have no one. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Gail. It's such an important story. And, thank you for being brave and recognizing this. It is always so sad when people say, oh, we never talked about it. Oh, I didn't want to scare somebody. Oh, I thought. And then people can end up stuck in an emergency room or not emergency room, an ICU while they try and figure out who the decision maker is. So this is really important. And I don't know how many times people have said to me, oh, well, I don't want to ask my family. It's really important in Hawaii. You can choose whoever it is that you want to make decisions, right? Some people have 10 kids, you'd have to choose anyway, or you have a spouse and a sister and you've got to choose. So fortunately, our laws are very strong like that. But I think that if you can think of this as a compassionate act, reach out to people, start with what matters to you. I love how you said that, Gail, of, would you like me to be your spokesperson? Wow. That's and then you have important conversations with that. So thank you. Okay, Any other questions? I hope we can encourage people. Not only do you have to do your own advance directive and choose your healthcare agent, but be thinking about those people who may not have any, who may feel that they don't have someone to speak for them, because that is really, that is a very important piece. Okay, so Blaine, it looks like we have about 20 minutes left, and I can go through briefly the Our Care, Our Choice Act. Hearing no opposition, I will do that. I'm also happy to stay on afternoon. I appreciate that this is, you know, that the timing was a little off, so we feel free to, anyway, I can stay on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is called the Our Care, Our Choice Act. This is a law that's been in effect 2 years. I guess we're almost at 3 years here in Hawaii. There's a bunch of terms for medical aid in dying: physician-assisted suicide, medically assisted death, medically hastened death. Very important to think about this. And as you can imagine, if people are in favor or opposed, they choose different words. That is why we usually just talk about the Our Care, Our Choice Act. So next slide, please. It began in January of 2019. It is appropriate for people who have live in Hawaii, are a resident, are adults, and have a prognosis of less than 6 months. So yes, it is the same as a hospice diagnosis. People need to be mentally capable of making decisions. They need to be acting voluntarily and capable of self-administering medication. So if someone has dementia, they are not appropriate. If they're not able to take medication themselves, it's not appropriate. And our state Department of Health recommends people enroll in hospice as they are considering this. And that is certainly our recommendation. If someone is thinking about the Our Care, Our Choice Act because of the pain or suffering that they have at the moment, it takes, and you'll hear from me, it takes at least 20 days in order to get a prescription. Hospice can be there in a few hours. So I think that it's, and I do want to say, if someone is asking you about the Our Care, Our Choice Act, I think it's important to figure out, why are they asking? Are they asking you because right now they are very upset that they have unrelieved pain, that they have spiritual suffering, that they have horrible stress? You need to deal with that right now. Or are they interested in the future, I'm interested in my options? That's a much different situation, that we can get people good information. But if somebody is asking because they have immediate stress, then it is, for instance, crucial that they enroll immediately in hospice, that they look for mental health support. So why is someone asking about this is very important. Okay, next slide, please. So I would encourage you to go to the Kukuama website. There's a link later on. You can read the different steps that are needed in order to get the medication. The process begins with an oral request to a physician, and then 20 days later, another request. So you have to be speaking, you have to be verbal, you have to be able to obviously be lucid and have capacity and to talk to the doctor. You have to have a written request, and then also a mental health evaluation. That is that's important here in Hawaii. So 2 oral requests. You need to write also a written request showing that you're able to write, and then a mental health evaluation and a signed final attestation. Next slide, please. So the key thing here is that there are different roles for people to play. You need to find a physician who is willing to carry through with this process, and they are called the attending physician. So they are the ones who take on the responsibility of taking care of the patient and treating the terminal illness that someone has, as well as helping to manage the medications for hastening the death. And then consulting provider, that is a second licensed physician who is then sort of the backup and can and confirm that the person in fact would like to move forward with this option. Okay, next slide, please. One of the important parts of this is that a mental health consultation has to be done. It can be done via Zoom. It can be done, telehealth is possible. There are a number of different providers who could, who can fill this role. A psychiatrist, psychologist, like licensed clinical social worker. And in that consultation, confirm that the person does, in fact, is capable of making this decision. They also confirm that the patient is not suffering from under-treatment or non-treatment of depression or conditions which may interfere with an ability to make an informed decision. So it's important to say somebody can be being treated for depression. That does not disqualify you from this option. Okay, next slide, please. So just some other things to think about. A death certificate will say, it lists the terminal illness that the person died of. It would say cancer or heart disease. It doesn't say that people used the Our Care, Our Choice Act. Again, hopefully people are getting the services of a hospice, because not only are they doing all of the support for the person and the loved ones, but then the medication, these are very, very powerful medications. If they weren't used, they would kill someone. So you need to be very clear about how they are being properly disposed. It should have no effect on life insurance or annuities. It is not euthanasia. Euthanasia would be that a physician would hasten someone's death. This is that a patient would take the medication themselves. And this is all voluntary. Physicians, organizations, facilities, they can opt in or out with this. Okay, next slide, please. So some special considerations to think about. It is still illegal on a federal level. So it's legal now in a number of states. It's legal in Hawaii, but federally it is illegal. So you could not use Medicaid or Medicare funds to for this. The VA is very clear also that is a non-starter, and certainly not in any facilities that they run. However, I don't think that cost should be a consideration for people. Because it is now relatively new and again still illegal on a federal level, there are still things that people are trying to figure out. So I think most people who are on Medicare, for instance, will probably have to pay for some things out of pocket, but it wouldn't, not necessarily physicians' visits. And again, I really want to encourage people to have good, honest discussions about why people are interested in this option, as well as the other options that are available to them. So I think that those are very important. Today, we've talked about palliative care as an option. We've talked about hospice as an option, and we really want to make sure that people recognize that there are a lot of options that are available to them to have. Okay, and next slide, please. Other important points to remember. The attending physician is responsible for ensuring that all of the requirements are met. There's like a 21-point checklist for that person to go through. So it's not a simple process, which is also, though, helping to make sure that this is not misused. That was definitely something that the legislature was really was very clear on. It is very clear who completes which part of the process. Again, I mentioned before, everything is completely voluntary. It is clear that there are not a lot of physicians who are comfortable with this option, so that might be a difficulty, but there are ways to find those physicians. And then it's an out-of-pocket expense, which I mentioned before. Okay, so next slide, key things to remember. People who request to use the Arcara Choice Act, they should be enrolled in hospice. Again, you can be enrolled in hospice the same day, somebody, even on a weekend. So if somebody is suffering, if somebody has unrelieved pain, if they have other issues, they should be enrolled in hospice immediately. We recommend that it is recommended that people begin the process early because it takes at least 20 days. And sometimes it takes longer depending upon finding the right providers, because it is important to remember it is voluntary. It's voluntary for the patient, but it's also voluntary for the providers or a facility, whether or not they're going to do that. So next slide, please. There are currently some legislation being discussed of changing the waiting time. Would APRNs, advanced practice nurses, be able to prescribe? Potentially changing the wait time so that people who are closer to death wouldn't have to wait so long. Those are all things that different groups are lobbying for. Kukuamau is an organization that strives to give good information. We are not in any way involved legislatively with this act. And then the next slide, reasons for requesting medical aid in dying. I think these are really important to remember, and I mentioned this before. Why is somebody asking? What are they concerned about? So some of the chief reasons you'll see at the top of this: loss of autonomy, less able to engage in enjoyable activities, loss of dignity, losing control of bodily functions, burden on the family. These are the top issues. Pain is much lower down the list, as is financial implications. So these are these existentialist questions, which tends to be why people are asking about this. And when I listen to people, people also say, well, I'd like to have the option. I'd like to understand my options. So again, if someone is asking you, if someone's talking to you about it, find out, is something happening today? Are they concerned about other things? For me, a lot of these things are very spiritual issues too, thinking about autonomy, dignity, what's the point of life? So perhaps since you're coming from the faith community, you can also be helping people with that. Okay, so the next slide has some contact information. You can go to the State Department of Health, to their website to learn about the Arcara Choice Act. Kukuamau, we have a page on there on the quick link side. When you go to the Kukuamau homepage, which is kukuamau.org, we have what we call quick links on the side. And one of them is for the Arcara Choice Act. And you'll see there's also palliative care for patients and families, palliative care for professionals, hospice in Hawaii. So you can click on those quick links and they take you to the most important sites. So those are good that's good information. And then in California, they also have some good information on medical aid and dying on their site. But I would go either to the State Department of Health or to Kukuamau to see specifically what is happening here in Hawaii. Okay, next slide, please. So as we come to the end here, and again, I'm very happy to answer any questions. I hope that folks will join our mailing list. We have a free newsletter that comes out on a pretty regular basis that gives resources about all sorts of things connected to serious illness. So webinars, free resources, all kinds of materials that are there. We also hope that you will look at our website. I mentioned before that there is there's materials on advanced care planning, because all of you need to go make sure you have your advanced directive in order. If people want more information about POLST, that lives there. Things about palliative care. We have a number of materials, including the advanced directive in the POLST, translated into 10 different languages. So if you work with somebody whose first language is not English, sometimes it really helps to have people to have things read where they can read things in other languages. We also have that, we have good translations in Japanese. There's actually a good group of people inside of Kukuamau who speak Japanese and are always happy to help out. And then finally, if anybody's thinking, oh, I'd love to have a speaker about something else we talked about for my, for your church or temple or other group, let us know. We are always happy to help with that. So next slide, please. So these are some of the resources that are available for free. I mentioned the advanced directives, handouts on understanding tube feeding, CPR, POLST, things like that. So I hope that you can go to our website for that. And then finally, the last slide is contact information for me and Hope. And again, the Kukuamau webpage has lots of good information. So you can just keep this up while I ask if there are any questions. And I see a couple people thanked Gail for her fabulous story, and I would second that. Thank you, Gail. So are there any questions about any of the materials that I went through today? Anything around the Our Care, Our Choice Act? Anything that people are wondering about? You can raise your hand. You can, oh, I see that Gloria also did her advanced directive. Good job, Gloria. So lots of talking, long session. Any more questions? Anything that wasn't clear to you? I hope people will be thinking, wow, palliative care is pretty great. How do, my uncle would need that. Or, oh, okay, we need to talk with my family about palliative care for grandma. I think that hopefully you've heard that from us, and you can, you now know to go to the Kukuamau website or contact us, and certainly Reverend Blaine knows how to find us. So just let me know. So Blaine, I'm going to call on you. Any last questions you'd like me to touch on?
No, thank you very much, Jeanette. Very complete, very thorough. Are there any questions for Jeanette? Or other questions or any other comments? I know we presented a lot of information this morning. Thank you so much for being here with us. But these are very important conversations to have, right? With our families, with our loved ones, with ourselves, to, determine what do we want? How do we want to be cared for? And what are our wishes, both medically and spiritually, as we face end of life. So,
yeah,
don't be afraid to have the conversation.
And I would say, Blaine, thank you. Don't be afraid. And I find that when the first time is always the hardest. And then once you've had that, oftentimes people are quite relieved that they can begin conversations. So on our Kukuamau website, if you look under advanced care planning, like there's a starter kit, there's a tool for starting family conversations, because people always say, oh my God, what would I say? So what matters to me? And I will, the bad news for you folks, you got to do your own first, instead of saying, oh, mom, you're looking old, we better do this. No. Got to start with you, and then you can help the rest of the group. So I really encourage people, and now the holidays are coming, good time to have these conversations. I see Carol has her hand up.
Yes, I was too slow to take down the telephone number of Hope Young at Kukuamau. So what's the telephone number?
Yes, well, Hope Young's phone number, and I will try to find out where Hope is. I
see
will
it.
admit
Uh-huh.
that I'm concerned. 221-2970.
Okay, got it. Thank you, dear.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, Hope is a wealth of information. She talks about this a lot, so she's got a lot of good information, and we are happy to hook people up. I know she put in a slide. I don't know if Amy's still here, but Community First over in Hilo is a fabulous organization as well that you can be contacting. Amy, if you want to either unmute yourself or put something into the chat to share, that would be. There she is. Yay. Hi, Amy. Good
Hi,
job.
Jeanette. You did an excellent job. And while we were waiting for Hope to come on, I did give a little plug for Community First program. So thank you so much, Jeanette. You did excellent.
Okay, good. Yes, it's I will I guess I'm not going to clean my house today. That's I would much rather be with you. So thank you for sparing me doing the floors and the windows. Thank you. I appreciate that. So Donna asked, due to COVID, many times the questions deserving an answer come back as it's private. Interesting comment. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but if I can help you with something, Donna, hopefully, I think that with COVID, all of us have recognized, and especially the last horrific 3 months of so many people dying in Hawaii, how important it is to have conversations. So, oh, there's Donna. Donna, sorry, what did you?
Okay, no, I'm trying to, okay, I got it.
There you go.
No, I always, even with Andy, I belong to the same church, right? And I respected his position about not getting vaccinated, but I wanted to have his story told. But then the answer comes out, it's private. How this pandemic, the COVID, is affecting us worldwide, not only in Hawaii. David Ige, as the governor, he takes positions and, we follow them, But when it's a person that that it's close to you, well, maybe I voiced something like that when I asked Reverend Blaine earlier, that sometimes I know the answer to the questions I'm giving anyway. So even in your own family, your own relatives, we have my grandniece that just tested positive, and her whole family had to be tested. I went to a funeral. The children of the deceased, he called me to say he tested positive, so all the attendees of the funeral had to get tested. That's the first time I even got a test. Like I was so trying to be so careful and wear my mask, don't go out too much. I'm not saying things are going to get back to normal and what is normal, and I know what the word privacy means, but when it affects you, it affects your family. My mainland niece, nephew, and children, grandnieces and nephew, they're coming to Hawaii in December. How can I not hug them? Because I'm afraid.
Right. You know, Donna, you bring up so many good points. So first of all, I would say if you get yourself a good N95 mask, you can hug people. You're vaccinated, you get your booster. If we're all vaccinated and we all get our boosters, we have a lot of protection. And if you wear an N95 and you wash your hands, you're even more protected. And so I think that those are really good steps. Unfortunately, I do think it's important to remember that unless you, and even if you know somebody, you have to assume that they're not vaccinated. So you take care of this. You wear a mask. Don't, go. You can go to a funeral, but wear a mask. Don't touch. No handshaking. We can say hello in other ways. But I think for me, one of the key things right now is that all of us need to reach out to our friends and check in on them. I think it is a super stressful time. I think that Aloha will help us through, and we will get through this, but I'm concerned with where we are today. And if you call one person and just check in on them and chat with them, see how people are doing, I think that this is what we need. We need to show compassion. Like you said, I have a lot of trouble with people who aren't vaccinated, a bunch of people in my family. So I have to really work on showing love and compassion and understanding first. But I think that that's what's going to help us. So if we could each, this is like my plea from the Kokua Mau side, you can, if you know people who are healthcare workers, send them flowers, give them a call, send them a note. Most of them said, hey, I gained 20 pounds in COVID, no more donuts. But, show people that you care about them and you notice. And I think it's also important to notice how many people have died in the last 3 months. If a plane went down with 300 people in it in Hawaii, we would be doing different things that we're doing. There's a lot of shame connected to COVID right now, which is not healthy grieving, and that's not healthy. So we need to rally ourselves and show compassion and love, and maybe not ask the questions we want to ask, and just show love and compassion to people. Hope told me yesterday 2 of her classmates died of COVID in the last 2 months. So yeah, I don't know. Blaine, you're the spiritual person. Maybe you talked about this already, like help us. What is it? How do we as individuals going forth with love and compassion into the world? Just seems like this is a really important time to be recognizing that everyone is in a difficult time right now.
Yeah, very much, right? We have to have compassion for self and compassion for others, right? And that's sometimes the hardest thing to cultivate, right? And so, right, how can we be patient? How can we practice compassion, right? And offer compassion for self and others. That goes back to just our values, right? Our practice, right? Our understanding of the Dharma and the working of the Buddha in our lives, right? And how do we live out these teachings, right? So yeah, there's no easy answers, right? But there are ways that we can understand life, right? With a little more kindness, with a little more compassion. And that's what the teachings are for, to help us to just be a little bit more self-reflective, right? And then to offer a little more compassion to others. And in the end, we're only human, and we can only try and do our best, and just to know that we're not alone, right? In this journey, on this journey. And that's what the teachings help us to see. We're intimately connected, the interconnection of all life, right? And our responsibility to do our part to make life just a little bit better. So if we all did that, right? We all tried just a little bit, then I think we can overcome many obstacles and many challenges together, right? And I think the pandemic has shown that we are so profoundly connected to one another, and that we are responsible for ourselves and for the lives of others in our actions. So take hope, right, in that we aren't alone.
That's beautiful. Well, so I encourage people, choose a friend. If you know somebody in healthcare, a nurse, a social worker, a doctor, a chaplain, write them a note. People are exhausted in ways that they never thought they would be exhausted. But I believe if we do this together, and as Reverend Blaine said, with love and compassion and following the teachings and following our heart, I believe that we will get through this, but hopefully with a community that then is working together. So that is I just really feel that. And when people send me notes, hey, I love it. I love it that people reach out to me and think. So I would encourage all of us, choose somebody today, reach out. Okay, Blaine, anything else? Are we, Paul? What do you guys want to, any more questions?
Yeah, unless there are any final questions.
Yeah,
we can
and
take
I'm
them
happy to stick around if people have something else to ask, but I don't see any questions. You, Pete, your folks are fabulous. Wow, 3 hours.
Yeah.
You must have been brilliant.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. And actually, Linda, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, I'll have you close this out too, but I would just like to thank Jeanette, Gail, and this is funny. I hope Hope is fine. We kind of missed her today, but it was a powerful presentation. Thank you, Reverend Blaine, for your spiritual side of this too. So I think we all can take something back with us. I've had a couple of questions answered too, and maybe we need to share this with our community because many people have questions. I think we did this about 10 years ago in a different format, and it was well received. And I think this is a good follow-up for it. So again, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for hanging in there from 9 o'clock till now. We ran a little bit over time, but anything that's good, we must make time for it. So Reverend, could you do
so thank you. Sure, thanks. Again, thank you so much for attending and for being part of this journey and for learning and being, and just wanting to deepen your understanding both of our options, right, at end of life, and to learn and to deepen our understanding of the teachings and how they can offer support and wisdom for both living and dying. So again, thank you so much. If you please join me in Gassho, and let's recite the Nembutsu together. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Again, thank you so much for being together with us this morning. And like Jeanette mentioned, if there are any other questions, we'll officially close, but we can answer a few more questions.
Thank you very much. Wonderful program. So informative. Thank you.